There must be. It's not a place you can get to by a boat or a train. It's far, far away. Behind the moon, beyond the rain.
You're a wizard, Harry.
If I take one more step, it'll be the farthest away from home I've ever been.
Way up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby.
Do or do not. There is no try.
Open the pod bay doors, Cal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that. I love you, Margie. I love you, Nora.
Won't you take me with you?
Why, of course I will.
Hooray! We're off to see a wizard.
Oh, well, you're not starting out very well.
Oh, I'll try. Really, I will.
To Oz?
To Oz.
Good morning, Watershed. A year of Sundays doing this to an empty stage, so I'm feeling some kind of way at seeing some faces. And I'm very excited to be kicking off a new series for us this morning. And the weather is beautiful outside. I'm giddy despite the heartache that I'm also holding. But what if I told you every hero, real or imagined, follows the same ancient archetypal path to greatness? What if I told you there are cosmic, recurring patterns in the world around us, and the heroes of today are just simply retellings of the heroes of yore? Here's what I like for you guys to do right now. I want you to take a hero and just conjure them up in your brain. Not a personal hero. Let's save mom and dad for later. Maybe a historical figure, pop icon, your favorite book, your favorite film, comic book, whatever, right? Just think of a hero and kind of keep that hero in mind as we track through this morning. This series unearths a theory called the monomyth. And if you want to follow along at home, I recommend Joseph Campbell's The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Joseph Campbell is to mythology what Carl Jung is to psychology. And his archetype of the hero's journey is widely studied by writers, filmmakers, storytellers alike. In fact, my day job as a college professor, I've taught an entire semester's writing course based on this theory, on this monomyth theory. Out the gate, I want to tell you it's an imperfect guide. Joseph Campbell had some gender issues. He didn't recognize women as heroes. He only saw them as goddess or temptress or mother divine. But we'll forgive him that because he does have a pretty good blueprint. It's pretty stunningly accurate. And in the coming weeks, we are going to embark on this journey together. George Lucas even has credited the inception of the Star Wars series to the monomyth theory. So I hope that you will enjoy it. I'm doing a lot of context setting today for my colleagues that are going to follow in the weeks to come. I hope I don't slip into lecture mode. I've taught this so much that I'm like, avoid your professor voice. That's an occupational hazard. But I do need to lay down the premise of the hero's journey, and we do have some basics to cover. So hopefully you've got that hero pulled up in your mind, and we are ready to go. Once upon a time, in a long, long ago, faraway land. I feel like that's how all legendary stories start, don't they? And that story starter, once upon a time, is one we all know by heart. It functions to set scene, but really it's a landscape we're already familiar with. Whether it's a farm on the outskirts of a kingdom or the gritty urban underbelly of a somewhat dangerous metropolis, we all know where the journey starts. The confines of home, however we want to define that, are all the same. Safe, in a manner of speaking, familiar for sure, normal, maybe even boring, but certainly representative of the status quo. Home is the starting place. It's the flawed world we already know. The first step of the hero's journey is the departure from home. If we consider home as both a physical plane and a metaphorical space, we might be able to understand how home becomes confining. Phrases like leave the nest resonate with us for a reason. It's often seen as this initiation, right? When we leave for home, it's this critical point in our lives, and there is a need, not just a desire, but a need to leave home. We're going to be revisiting this really crude sketch note I created, and it should be coming up here on the screen. It's going to take us through this sort of cyclical journey of the hero, right? So we're starting kind of top center. That's our starting point. We'll kind of keep revisiting this, right? Typically, there's some sort of call to adventure that gets us to leave that nest. Biblically speaking, we see this in the origin story. Adam and Eve are banished from Eden, but there was a call to adventure. In that case, they were tricked, right, by the snake, the serpent. Harry Potter and all those letters that his aunt and uncle tried to keep hiding from him, and then the owls, and then Hagrid comes, right, and just tells the boy, Harry, you're a wizard. I feel, to be quite honest, that I can't touch Lord of the Rings, because that's like David territory. And as I was like prepping, I was like, no, can't use that one. So I'm just going to reference it, and then I'm going to let him talk about that. Sherlock Holmes's adventures always start at home on Baker Street with a mysterious letter or frantic visitor. Mulan steals away under the cover of night to take her father's place at the front lines of battle. Neo from The Matrix. I don't know if that's resonating with anybody. I wasn't sure what our age range here was this morning. Young King Arthur. Buddha, Malcolm X, any Disney princess, any Greek demigod like Achilles or Odysseus, Moses, Jesus. Take your hero. What's their call to adventure? There's always this whispering, a little tug when the universe you live in isn't where you belong. But it's human nature for us to avoid pain, to curtail fear, to live in an imperfect world that's knowable. Our umbilical cords keep us tethered to what is native, but that innocence can only be safeguarded for a little while. Eventually, we hear or feel the beckoning. We slowly become disenchanted with what is, and we seek a different reality, a different way. The call to adventure is that critical first step in realizing the hero's identity. But not all heroes listen. Some refuse the call. And there are perhaps lots of compelling reasons to refuse the call. Some don't wish to disrupt the balance of the status quo, the comfortability of the world they know. Some don't heed the call because the unknown is scary. Dorothy and her cast of unlikely heroes who are following a literal path, right? Like that's about as obvious as it can get. They give us different archetypes for this. The cowardly lion is initially too afraid to embark on the yellow brick road. Fear is a true deterrent. There are other darker forces that keep us or keep the hero from becoming self-actualized. Maybe it's depression or addiction. Think about the marriage you stayed far too long in. The job you didn't quit even though it didn't fulfill you at all. The toxic relationships you enabled. The drink or substance you said you could quit anytime but didn't. The call to adventure, the call to change your stars is often easier to ignore than it is to answer. There is always a path to take, always. But we know from Scripture some paths are far easier than others. In the book of Matthew, we get a warning about this, right? Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. That small gate, that's the call to adventure, the call to step onto a path to a truer version of ourselves. The call to adventure is a call to change, and each person presented with that opportunity understands there's a you can't go back now element. Indeed, once you accept the call, you, the hero, enter a new realm. Dorothy's iconic admission, we're not in Kansas anymore, represents an epic crossing into new thresholds that forever change the hero. In folklore and in children's tale, crossing the threshold is really visible. Think of Alice as she falls down the rabbit burrow into Wonderland. Gone is the world she knew. The ordinary world gives way to the unknown world. The children who stumble through a wardrobe into the fantastical world of Narnia, those Goonie kids in the series of underground caverns. These fairy tales make new landscapes easy to spot. But in our lives, it's harder to discern. Maybe it's a physical move or taking on a new job. Maybe it's the new territory we find ourselves in when we're entering into a new relationship or exiting an old one. Maybe it's the new space of what it means to do anti-racist work or what life looks like post-pandemic. I think about Malcolm X on his religious pilgrimage to Mecca and how he points to that visit to the birthplace of Islam as life-changing for him. But I also think about even smaller shifts in space, like Rosa Parks taking up white real estate at the front of the bus, or the Greensboro 4 just up the road, those brave young Black men who staged a sit-in at a Woolworth's counter. Weren't those thresholds? Did those not mark a point of no return, of no going back? Look, friends, I'm not going to lie to you. This new space, whether physical or mental or emotional or spiritual, it often can be disorienting and frightening, but it's also an exciting place to be. The thing is, this monomyth journey, it requires vulnerability. Brené Brown, who is a supreme voice on living your best authentic life, says this: vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. To abide in new territory is to risk vulnerability, and actualizing the hero's journey takes us on a road of trials. So before I became a college professor, I was a high school English teacher at a Title I school. I would have never left that job. I loved it. Thanks for she's a principal at a Montessori school, the one clap you heard. Anyway, before teaching at Queens, I was a high school English teacher at a Title I school. Would not have ever left that job had I not been laid off. It felt missional. And when I tell you, that when I heard that my contract was being terminated, I was like, I'm sorry, what? I was crushed, and I was really confused. I thought I was doing what I was where I was placed divinely. I knew I was doing meaningful work. I thought I'd been placed there by God, and maybe I was, who knows? I had left a corporate job. I was the creative director for a branding firm. I was naming pharmaceutical drugs. I was flying to New York and meeting with people like Pfizer, and I was making a ton more money, and that was unfulfilling. So then I land teaching at a Title I school where I have a snack drawer because there are kids who are not getting meals, and that road seemed to be ending for me, and I could not make sense of it. The whiplash that I felt losing that job was incredible. And what followed after that was a season of busy I have never experienced before. And I have twins, and this was more than raising twin boys. This was insane. I took on so many odd jobs. I nannied, I tutored, I was a writing coach, I dog sat. I had to look at my phone to tell me where I was supposed to go next because I just was so untethered. And then somehow, kind of out of the blue, I landed an adjunct teaching position at Queens. And somehow I managed to make financial ends meet doing that and subbing at the same place that I'd been let go of. I was making less than $20K a year. It was the hardest year of my adult life. That road of trials, if I can be so bold and call it that, it felt like a baptism by fire, where I could only focus on the next thing in front of me. Truth is, I think we've all experienced a road of trials. I've held my friend's hands as she processed back-to-back miscarriages. I've witnessed up close and personal the dissolution of marriages. I've sat in a hospital cafeteria waiting through grief and fear as my dear friend explained to me that her then 4-month-old son needed a heart transplant. I've been stunned at the sudden diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer of a friend's husband, and in less than a year, watched her navigate through unimaginable grief when he died. I've counseled students who reach a crossroads in their academic careers and realize they had to make their own way through the world. If I asked you to examine your own life, I imagine you could articulate similar roads. And what not all trials are the literal life and death kind. We cannot traverse them without changing who we are. If your hero is like a movie action hero, this is like all of the fight sequence. It's like the middle of the movie, all the shiz they go through. But there is a transformation that occurs on this road. The old self is burned away and made new. I can't think of a greater example of this than Saul, hell-bent on persecuting Jesus' disciples. He's chasing after the Lord with righteous fury. The road to Damascus, yet again, another road. See these archetypes, they just keep coming, right? The road of Damascus becomes the scene of his conversion, where he's blinded by God's light. So transformed is he that he changes his name to reflect his new identity. And Paul, one of the greatest pillars of Christianity, comes into being. Sometimes transformation is hard. John the Baptist talked about baptizing with the Holy Spirit and fire instead of just water. And the phrase baptism by fire has come to be synonymous with hard transitions. My friends survived their divorces. My widow friend has found joy again. My friend whose son has a new beating heart in his chest walks through the aftermath of trauma with incredible grace. None of them are the same people I knew before. A part of them died when they experienced their respective losses. I don't know how they could have avoided that, to be honest. To be made new means something has to die. But sometimes death is a good thing. We just celebrated this very thing in Easter. I need my kids back in greenhouse. Y'all, they thought it was about the bunny, and I was like, there's a backslide that happened. I digress. Send your kids to greenhouse if you have them. I'm just saying, I think we need it. Blair. Anyway, Jesus conquers the grave. I had to explain that to them a little bit. We watched Narnia, that helped. But the resurrection story is what happened when fear dies. Buddha reached enlightenment when he allowed his skepticism and ignorance to die. When we step out of toxic relationships, we kill dependency and replace it with self-empowerment. Death is critical to the hero's journey. Campbell talks about atonement as the outcome of this transformation. I break the word atonement to at-one-ment. I know that's not spelled the same way, but just follow me. It's a state of being at one with yourself. This might be what psychologists consider self-actualization. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is at the very top. It signals the highest level of psychological development possible. Simply put, it's the fulfillment of your unique gifts, your potential fully realized. Your ego satisfied with itself and at peace. This harmonious balance is what the hero achieves for having the courage to leave home in the first place, for traversing the road of trials and facing perhaps their own demons. Whatever imbalance called the hero away from home in the first place has now been righted. Sikhism is a religion I admittedly don't know too much about, but I was prompted to research it recently. And the origin story of this faith, to me, non-expert opinion, is a beautiful example of atonement. Nanak, the first Sikh guru, is said to have gone to bathe in a river with a friend. But Nanak mysteriously disappeared and was presumed dead. Three days later, however, Nanak reemerges from the water. In the Punjab region of India where he is from, folks were either fiercely devoted to Hindu or Muslim religions. But Nanak's first words after he appears from the water are, "There are neither Muslim nor Hindu." He goes on to describe a mystical encounter with God where he is given a cup of divine nectar called Amrit to drink. The nectar bestowed the gift of God's name upon him, and he was charged by God with the preaching of this divine name. Guru Nanak becomes one with God in this moment. Other sacred world religions, like Christianity, have similar veins of divine connection with God. I find comfort in this. That while on the surface we can look so dissimilar in our faith practices and doctrines, that when we take closer inspection, there's actually a lot of similarity that binds us. At the root of every religion I've ever studied, there has been love at its core. Love that requires us to treat each other well. Love that not only binds us to our God, but to other people. I wonder sometimes if we're not all in pursuit of the same God, just in different native tongues. I wonder if we're not missing the whole wide, beautiful picture. I wonder if it's not just as simple as love God and love everybody else. I'm digressing a little bit. Atonement is the penultimate checklist in the hero's journey. In the film, it's the climactic moment, maybe after an epic fight scene where the hero meets his god. He might meet his long-lost dad, might encounter a goddess of some sort, uncovers a big secret, meets the president in all of those like Vin Diesel-y movies that are very much the same. You guys get it, right? Like, I don't want to ruin movie going for you, but like, we're running out of movies. Friday night is movie night at home, and it's getting ugly, y'all. We're out of movies. Anyway, so what's left after you meet the president or like the god or Loki or whomever? What happens? The end? You have to go back home. The hero comes home changed. And sometimes there's like a physical gift or boon that the hero brings back to share with the community. And sometimes the hero is the gift themselves. Now, I truly did oversimplify this for the sake of this morning because there are so many nuances to the cyclical pattern. There are tricksters, there are aids, there's magic, swords, and like sidekicks, all sorts of nuanced elements that I didn't even approach today. But the basic cyclical pattern of the monomyth is this: depart, change, return. And isn't life a series of this? We depart our own childhood landscapes as we come of age. We learn and experience heartache and loss and are fundamentally changed as a result. And after those lessons in humanity, aren't we returning back to ourselves? I've lived 1,000 lives since I was a child. I hope to live 1,000 more. Every physical place I've called home has impacted my identity. And every season of life, from childhood to adolescence to college years, dating, early marriage, motherhood, middle marriage, pandemic living, all of these have altered my identity too. My hope is that in these lessons of love, in coexisting with others and navigating difference and pain and suffering, I hope that they are teaching me what it means to be a better human and getting me closer to the goal of becoming self-actualized. Go back to that hero I asked you to call up. Did they track through the monomyth journey? Everybody here is shaking their heads, Facebook. They're saying yes. They're not. I lied, but just... They should have, otherwise I don't know what the next few weeks are going to look like. But think about yourself now, or someone you know deeply. The hero's journey isn't just for screenwriters and storytellers, it's for all of us. I've been a member of Watershed almost since the beginning. And when I track the journey that this community has made, when I look at our beginnings and the home our co-founding pastors left to create an intentional space here, I see the hero's journey laid out. I see blunders, I see the road of trials, I see mentors who came alongside of us and pointed out our missteps. I see us coming back again to center, a new place, a new identity. And when I think of the many wonderful people I've been privileged to learn from in this space, voices who are bravely, vulnerably, authentically sharing their stories of heartache, of ruin, of rising from the ashes of their former lives, being made new, every time someone shares what's saving them right now, I am reminded of the monomyth. When I look out into this space, which is finally beautifully filled with people, I see a hall of heroes. You are a hero. In the coming weeks, I want you to think about how these steps of an ancient archetypal pattern play out in your life, and how you might use them, whether in reflection or moving forward, to reach higher ground. Because you are a hero. Thank you, Watershed. For folks that are here, I remind you we've got last call outside. It is so good to see you. I'm sure the Facebook and the social media will be updated with all of the different announcements for our kids' space and youth spaces. Thank you so much for choosing to be here this morning. It means so much. Bye, you guys.